Good morning. This is Introduction to Algebra for Tuesday. Let's do a little review of yesterday's work. We said yesterday that sometimes we have complementary angles. What are complementary angles? Complementary angles are when we have two angles and we put them together and they form, or when we add their measurements together, they are 90 degrees. They are complementary. If we take two angles and we add them together, and together they equal 180 degrees, we say they are supplementary. Now, next I put the word protractor. What is a protractor? The protractor is the tool that we use to measure an angle. Then we have acute angles. Acute angles are any time when we use our protractor, we measure the angle, it is less than 90 degrees. It is an acute angle. Let's think here for a second. We said, what is an obtuse angle? An obtuse angle is an angle that is not small. It's very obtuse or very large. It means it's more than 90 degrees. If it's a straight angle, it will look like to us a line. A straight line or a straight angle measures exactly 180 degrees. Then we have a right angle. Right angles will always form a corner, a very perfect corner. And it will always measure exactly exactly 90 degrees. Adjacent angles. Adjacent angles must share a side, okay? So these two angles are adjacent because it has this side in common, okay? It has to have the same vertex. And what was the vertex? Vertex simply meant the starting point, okay? For it to be adjacent, it must have the same starting point or the same vertex. And it must share a side, okay? It must share a side between those two angles. Now, if you don't know these terms, you're gonna need to write them down so that you have them available to you. Okay, so let's say them again quickly. A complementary angle is when I add two angles and they equal 90 degrees. Supplementary angles, two angles, when they're together, they will have an adjacent side, but they will equal 180 degrees. A protractor, it is the tool we use to measure an angle. An acute angle is an angle that measures less than 90 degrees. An obtuse angle, an angle that measures more than 90 degrees. A straight angle measures exactly 180 degrees. A right angle will measure exactly 90 degrees. And then an adjacent angle is two angles that have the same vertex and they share one side of the angle like this, okay? Here's the vertex and here's the side that these two angles share. Now we're gonna learn a few more words today. I'm gonna bring this over so you can see it. First, I want you to write the word congruent down on your terms. Congruent. If two sides of a triangle are congruent or two shapes are congruent, what we're saying is they are exactly the same, okay? Two shapes or two triangles. I might have one triangle sitting straight up and tall and one laying on its side, but their measurements are the same. They are going to be congruent. Now, they could be the same shape, but not the same size. We call them similar. But if they are exactly the same, the word we use is congruent. Now, I have a poster here with a sailboat on it. As you can see, our verse today says, God, which made the heaven and earth and the sea and all things that are therein. You know, sometimes as we get busy in life, we fail to stop and look at the things around us and the people in our lives and to really appreciate the fact that God made them, God put them in our lives. We don't always appreciate them. A lot of times until they're gone, we don't appreciate them. And don't be like that, okay? Let's look up here. The sum of all of these triangles, okay? I don't mean the triangles added together, but each triangle. I know they're all triangles, but they all do look different, don't they? Okay? Because each triangle, if I add the degrees, is 180 degrees. All triangles, no matter how large or how small, or what type of a triangle they are, the sum of the angles of a triangle are 180 degrees. Okay? You need to write that fact down. Put it with your terms, because you're going to see these on a quiz. Okay? So make sure you have all these terms: complementary angle, supplementary angle, protractor, acute angle, obtuse angle, straight angle, right angle, adjacent angle, the word congruent. Now we're going to add the fact that the angles of a triangle, or the sum of them, is always 180 degrees. Now, even though all triangles, when you add the three angles within that triangle, even though they all equal 180 degrees, not all triangles look the same. Let me explain. We'll pull this up a little closer for you so you can see it a little better. Okay? Let's look at this poster. In this triangle, we see that it has this little square in the corner. That's an indication of what kind of an angle? A right angle. Anytime we have an angle, and here we have this angle right here, we have the square, it's telling me that this angle is a right angle. If any of the angles in a triangle are a right angle, then we call the triangle a right triangle. In geometry, the 90-degree angle, or the right angle, is extremely important. So a right triangle is simply a triangle that has one right angle, okay? Now, I used the word a second ago, congruent. Congruent, and I told you that two triangles that were exactly the same are congruent. Well, not only did I say that triangles can be congruent, I said that shapes could be congruent. You could have two congruent hexagons. You could have two congruent rectangles, okay? But you can also have congruent sides. A congruent side, mine here are not marked this way, but if you look in your book at page 326, look at the triangles along the bottom. Notice how they have those little dashes on them, okay? Don't look at the scalene triangle. Look at the second one, okay, and the third. Do you see how they have the little dashes? Those little dashes indicate, or tick marks as they're called, indicate those sides of the triangle are congruent. In other words, those two sides have the same measure. Now, let's look back at my poster for a second. If I have this very tall, skinny, notice how these two sides are the same, this in length. This side is a different length. This side and this side are congruent, okay? Meaning those two sides have the same measurement. If I take my ruler, that's at the end of my protractor, and I measure them, the measurement of this side and the measurement of this side of the triangle will be the same. Those two sides are congruent. Any triangle that has two congruent sides is an isosceles triangle. Write that in your notes. An isosceles triangle is a triangle with two congruent sides. Look at the next one. So we've had two types of triangles. We have a right triangle, which has a right angle. We have an isosceles triangle, which has two congruent sides. Now we have a scalene triangle, and notice that none of the sides are the same length. There are no congruent sides in a scalene triangle. Okay, the last one is easy to remember because of the name of it. It's an equilateral triangle. It simply means all three sides of the triangle are the same. Okay, so if I took my protractor and I measured this triangle, I would find the length of this side, the length of this side, and the length of this side to all be the same. Okay, so let's talk about our four triangles again quickly. We have a right triangle. We know it's a right triangle because it contains a right angle. We have an isosceles triangle. We know that it's an isosceles because it has two congruent sides. We have a scalene triangle. There are no congruent sides in a scalene triangle. Lastly, we have an equilateral triangle. An equilateral triangle has all three sides have the same measurement. It does not matter if I am measuring a right triangle, an isosceles triangle, a scalene triangle, or an equilateral triangle. It does not matter how tall that triangle is or how small that triangle is. All triangles, when I add the three angles together, will equal what? It will equal 180 degrees. Okay, let's look at our board. In our first triangle here at the top, we have triangle A, we have angle A, B, and C. Okay, in this triangle, this is what I'm going to tell you about it. In this triangle, I want you to tell me if angle B, okay, if angle B is 110 degrees, what are the measurements of angles A and C? Okay, well, what do I know? I know that when I add the three of them together, it equals what? It equals 180 degrees. I just told you that angle B is 110 degrees. 110, so I'm going to subtract 110 degrees. That means angle A and angle C together equals 70 degrees. Okay? You can look in your book at page 328, practice section on 328, letter A. We are looking at this triangle. You can just look at the board. I drew it up here for you. All right? This is the triangle. It is triangle A. We have three angles here. We have a missing angle. I don't know the measure of this one. This one is 40, and this one is 50. What is the measurement of this missing angle? Well, what do I know? All triangles equal how many degrees? 180 degrees. And I know that this and this together, 40 plus 50 is 90, okay? So what am I going to do? I'm going to add them together, and then I'm going to subtract, okay? Now, I want you to look at angle B. It says, find the measurement of angle B, okay? We have what kind of triangle there? Well, what do I know about M? Look at triangle in section in letter B. What is the angle? Well, it looks like the M goes with that. What is the one at the bottom where the M is? That is a 90-degree angle. How do you know it is a 90-degree angle? Because it has the little square, right? Okay, so you have 90 degrees for angle M. You have 30 degrees for angle P. What then is angle B? You're going to say 90 plus 30, and you will get 120. Okay? Now, what are you going to say? 180 minus 120, so angle B is 60 degrees. Look at number C in our practice section. This is triangle M. If angle M is 50 degrees, find the measures of D and E. Well, I know that D and E are going to be the same. How do I know that? See that little tick mark on each side? It means that they are congruent, okay? So what am I going to do? 180 minus 50 is 130. Now I'm going to say 130 divided by 2. Why? 130 is the number of degrees I have left, but I have to divide it between two equal angles. So when I divide it, it's going to be 65 degrees. Remember, those little tick marks tell us those two lines are the same. If two lines are the same, if they are congruent, they are going to form congruent angles, okay? Look at down in your exercise, Exercise 116. Okay, grab a sheet of paper. We're going to do a couple of these together.